Baskerville is a serif typeface designed in 1757 by John Baskerville in Birmingham, England and cut by John Handy. Baskerville is classified as a transitional typeface, intended as a refinement of what are now called old-style typefaces of the period, especially those of his most eminent contemporary, William Caslon. Compared to earlier designs, Baskerville increased the contrast between thick and thin strokes, making the serifs sharper and more tapered, and shifted the axis of rounded letters to a more vertical position. The curved strokes are more circular in shape, and the characters became more regular. These changes created a greater consistency in size and form. Baskerville's typefaces remain very popular in book design, and there are many modern revivals, which often add features such as bold type which did not exist in Baskerville's time. History. Baskerville's typeface was the culmination of a large series of experiments. Baskerville, a wealthy industrialist who had begun his career as a writing master, sought to develop new and higher quality methods of printing, developing also finely pressed, smooth paper and a high quality of ink. The result was a typeface that reflected Baskerville's ideals of perfection, where he chose simplicity and quiet refinement. His background as a writing master is evident in the distinctive swashtail on the uppercase Q and in the cursive serifs in his italic. In 1757, Baskerville published his first work, a collection of Virgil, which was followed by some 50 other classics. In 1758, he was appointed printer to the Cambridge University Press. It was there in 1763 that he published his master work, a folio Bible, which was printed using his own typeface, ink, and paper. At the start of his edition of Paradise Lost, he wrote a preface explaining his ambitions. The perfection of his work seems to have unsettled his contemporaries, and some claim the stark contrasts in his printing damaged the eyes. Baskerville was never particularly successful as a printer, being a printer of specialist and elite editions. Abroad, however, he was much admired, notably by Pierre-Simon Fournier, Giambattista Bodini, and Benjamin Franklin. His work was later admired in England by Thomas Frognall Deepdon, who wrote that in his italic letter. He stands unrivaled. Such elegance, freedom and perfect symmetry being in vain to be looked for among the specimens of Aldus and Linnaeus. Thomas Curson Hansard seems to have had misgivings about his work, praising him in some ways but also suggesting that he was a better printer than a type designer. On his death he eventually sold his material to a Paris literary society connected to Beau Marquez, placing them out of reach of British printing. Baskerville's styles of type and printing, although initially unpopular in Britain, proved influential for a brief transitional period in the late 18th and early 19th century, with printers and type designers such as Fry, Moore and Wilson of Glasgow. Bulmer, cut by the brother of Baskerville's foreman, was one design inspired by it, as is Bell. This period saw an increasing influence of Didone printing from the continent, from typefaces such as Didot and Bodini. It then disappeared from view following a trend towards Didone typefaces with a much darker style of impression. Updike suggests that this change mostly happened around 1815-20. The Scotch-Roman genre which proved popular in Britain and America is something of an intermediate between Didone typefaces and Baskerville's influence. Baskerville was revived in 1917 by Bruce Rogers, for the Harvard University Press, and released by G. Peignot A. Fils in Paris. Modern revivals have added features, such as italics with extra or no swashes and bold weights, that were not present in Baskerville's original work. The font is used widely in documents issued by the University of Birmingham and Castleton State College. A modified version of Baskerville is also prominently used in the Canadian government's corporate identity programme Euro, namely, in the Canada wordmark. Another modified version of Baskerville is used by Northeastern University, and the ABRSM monotype Baskerville is often used by the band CHV or CHES. Characteristics. Key features of Baskerville are its E where the bottom arm projects further than the upper, a J with a ball terminal at the bottom, an A where the loop rises to the top and right to join the main stem, and a G where the bottom loop is open. Many characters have clear ball terminals, in contrast to the more wedge-shaped serifs of earlier fonts. In italics, The J has a center bar, the PA tail pointing downwards and to the right, and AW with a center loop and swash on the right. In general, Baskerville's type has been described as rounder, more sharply cut than its predecessors. Baskerville's type featured text figures or lowercase numbers, the only form which existed at the time. Hot type versions. The following foundries offered versions of Baskerville. The original punches were sold by Baskerville's widow and eventually ended up in the possession of G. Peignot A. Fills by way of beau marques. Charles Peignot donated them to Cambridge University Press in 1953. With Baskerville's equipment unavailable in France, the Fry Type Foundry of Bristol cut its own version in the late 18th century, presumably by house designer Isaac Moore, who later showcased them on his own specimen. Moore's designs feature a slightly different A at large sizes followed in many revivals. When Ferry's successors closed, this version was acquired and issued in hot metal by Stevenson Blake under the name Baskerville Old Face. Moore's italic was considered substandard by revivalist printers, and Baskerville Old Face revivals have tended to either synthesize their own or offer none. The Ferry Foundry version was also sold by American type founders with an italic designed in 1915 by Morris Fuller Benton. Lanston Monotype's Baskerville was cut in 1923 under the direction of Stanley Morrison. Italic and bold versions were cut by Sol Hess. These versions were modified slightly and then offered by Intertype. As with other monotype revivals, the design is sometimes called Baskerville Mount. It is bundled with OS X in a somewhat slender digitization. Schrift Guyana AD Stempel issued a revival in 1926 under the name Original Baskerville. Linotype AG, the German arm of Mergenthaler Linotype, adapted the Stempel cutting of the face for line casting in 1927. Linotype's Baskerville was cut in 1923 by George W. Jones, though it was subsequently recut in 1936. A bold version was cut by Chauncey H. Griffith in 1939. It may sometimes be called Baskerville Lieutenant more loosely. The Scotch-Roman genre of transitional types reflects the influence of Baskerville's work, with increasing influence of Didone type from the continent around the beginning of the 19th century. The font Georgia is influenced by this genre. Due to the cachet of the name, other completely unrelated designs were named Baskerville in the hot metal period. Cold type versions. As it had been a standard type for many years, Baskerville was widely available in cold type. Alpha type, Autologic, Barthold, Compographic, Dymo, Starphoton, Harris, Mergenthaler, MGD Graphic Systems, Varityper, Hell AG and Monotype, all sold the face under the name Baskerville, while Graphic Systems Incorporated offered the face as Beaumont. Digital versions. As a somewhat precise design that emphasizes contrast between thick and thin strokes, modern designers may prefer different revivals for different text sizes, printing methods and on-screen display, since a design intended to appear elegant in large text sizes could look too spindly for body text. Factors which would be taken into account include compensation for size and ink spread, if any. Among recent digitizations, Francia Ek Angstrom Torm's extremely complete range of versions features 3 optical sizes, the text version having thicker strokes to increase legibility as metal type does. Meanwhile, the common digitization of Baskerville Old Face bundled with many Microsoft products features dramatic contrasts between thin and thick strokes. This makes it most suited to headings, especially since it does not have an italic. Another common question facing revivals is what to do with some letters such as N in italics. On faithful revivals such as the Storm digitization they have a swash, but this may be thought too distracting for general use or to space poorly in all caps text. Accordingly, many revivals substitute capitals without swashes. Dieter Hofrichter, who assisted Gar 1/4 NTE at Gerard Lang in designing a Baskerville revival for Barthold around 1980, commented, "We went to Birmingham where we saw original prints by Baskerville. I was quite astounded by how sharp the printing of his specimens is. They are razor sharp, it almost hurt your eyes to see them. So elegant and high contrast." He showed in this way what he could achieve. That was Baskerville's ideal, but not necessarily right for today. Many companies have provided digital releases, including Linotype, URW++, and Bitstream as well as many others. These may have varying features, for example some lacking small caps. Monotype Baskerville is installed on Macs as part of OS X, while many Windows computers received Moore's adaptation under the name of Baskerville Oldface in the URW digitization without an italic or bold weight. Adaptations A particularly idiosyncratic Baskerville revival is Mrs. Yves, designed by Zuzanna Licko. Named after Baskerville's housekeeper-turned-wife, it uses a low X height to create a bright page without reducing stroke width. It is often used on book titles and headings. It uses a variety of ligatures to create effects with linked characters. Harriet is an adaptation by OK Type inspired by American 19th-century printing. Bigmore by Matthew Carter is a recent, complex digitization of the larger sizes of Isaac Moore's early adaptation, that often called Baskerville Oldface, adding an italic effect on readers. A research study showed that the use of the Baskerville font increased the likelihood of the reader agreeing with a statement by 1.5% as compared to the average of 5 other fonts, including Comic Sans, which had the most negative influence on agreement of the 6. Gallery, some examples of volumes published by Baskerville. References: Lawson, Alexander S., Anatomy of a Typeface, Boston, Godine, ISBN 0-87923-333-8. Meggs, Philip B. and Carter, Rob, Typographic Specimens, The Great Typefaces, New York, Van Nostrand Reinhold, ISBN 0-442-00758-2, Meggs, Philip B. and McKelvey, Roy, Revival of the Fittest, New York, RC Publications, ISBN 1-883915-08-2. Updike, Daniel Berkeley, 1922, Printing Types Their History, Forms and Use 2, New York, Dover Publications, ISBN 0-486-23929-2, General Survey of Printing including of the years after Baskerville and his influence on printing. Many illustrations. External links, Typopal, Baskerville, John Baskerville One Love Typography, September 23, 2007, Open Baskerville an open source revival of Moore's Baskerville, without an italic.